Cultural imperialism is the cultural aspects of imperialism. Imperialism, here, is referring to the creation and maintenance of unequal relationships between civilizations favoring the more powerful civilization. Therefore, it is the practice of promoting and imposing a culture, usually of politically powerful nations over less potent societies. It is the cultural hegemony of those industrialized or economically influential countries, which determine general cultural values and standardized civilizations throughout the world. Many scholars employ the term, especially those in the fields of history, cultural studies, and post-colonial theory. The term is usually used in a pejorative sense, often in conjunction with a call to reject such influence. Cultural imperialism can take various forms, such as an attitude, a formal policy, military action, so long as it reinforces cultural hegemony. Background and definitions. Although the Oxford English Dictionary has a 1921 reference to the cultural imperialism of the Russians, John Tomlinson, in his book on the subject, writes that the term emerged in the 1960s and has been a focus of research since at least the 1970s. Terms such as media imperialism, structural imperialism, cultural dependency and domination, cultural synchronization, electronic colonialism, ideological imperialism, and economic imperialism have all been used to describe the same basic notion of cultural imperialism. Various academics give various definitions of the term. American media critic Herbert Schiller wrote, "The concept of cultural imperialism today, 1975, best describes the sum of the processes by which a society is brought into the modern world system, and how its dominating stratum is attracted, pressured, forced, and sometimes bribed into shaping social institutions to correspond to, or even promote, the values and structures of the dominating center of the system." The public media are the foremost example of operating enterprises that are used in the penetrative process. For penetration on a significant scale, the media themselves must be captured by the dominating, penetrating power. This occurs largely through the commercialization of broadcasting. Tom McPhail defined electronic colonialism as the dependency relationship, established by the importation of communication hardware, foreign-produced software, along with engineers, technicians, and related information protocols, that vicariously establish a set of foreign norms, values, and expectations which, in varying degrees, may alter the domestic cultures and socialization processes. Suinamli observed that communication imperialism can be defined as the process in which the ownership and control over the hardware and software of mass media as well as other major forms of communication in one country are singly or together subjugated to the domination of another country, with deleterious effects on the indigenous values, norms and culture. Ogun saw media imperialism often described as a process whereby the United States and Western Europe produce most of the media products, make the first profits from domestic sales, and then market the products in third world countries at costs considerably lower than those the countries would have to bear to produce similar products at home. Downing and Sravani Mohammadi state, imperialism is the conquest and control of one country by a more powerful one. Cultural imperialism signifies the dimensions of the process that go beyond economic exploitation or military force. In the history of colonialism, the educational and media systems of many third world countries have been set up as replicas of those in Britain, France, or the United States and carry their values. Western advertising has made further inroads, as have architectural and fashion styles. Subtly but powerfully, the message has often been insinuated that Western cultures are superior to the cultures of the Third World. Needless to say, all these authors agree that cultural imperialism promotes the interests of certain circles within the imperial powers, often to the detriment of the target societies. The issue of cultural imperialism emerged largely from communication studies. However, cultural imperialism has been used as a framework by scholars to explain phenomena in the areas of international relations, anthropology, education, science, history, literature, and sports. Theoretical foundations. Many of today's academics that employ the term cultural imperialism are heavily informed by the work of Foucault, Derrida, said, and other post-structuralist and post-colonialist theorists. Within the realm of post-colonial discourse, cultural imperialism can be seen as the cultural legacy of colonialism, or forms of social action contributing to the continuation of Western hegemony. To some outside of the realm of this discourse, the term is critiqued as being unclear, unfocused, and/or contradictory in nature. Michel Foucault. The work of French philosopher and social theorist Michel Foucault has heavily influenced use of the term cultural imperialism, particularly his philosophical interpretation of power and his concept of governmentality. Following an interpretation of power similar to that of Machiavelli, Foucault defines power as immaterial, as a certain type of relation between individuals that has to do with complex strategic social positions that relate to the subject's ability to control its environment and influence those around itself. According to Foucault, power is intimately tied with his conception of truth. Truth, as he defines it, is a system of ordered procedures for the production, regulation, distribution, circulation, and operation of statements, which has a circular relation with systems of power. Therefore, inherent in systems of power is always truth, which is culturally specific, inseparable from ideology, which often coincides with various forms of hegemony. Cultural imperialism may be an example of this. Foucault's interpretation of governance is also very important in constructing theories of transnational power structure. In his lectures at the Collège de France, Foucault often defines governmentality as the broad art of governing, which goes beyond the traditional conception of governance in terms of state mandates, and into other realms such as governing a household, souls, children, a province, a convent, a religious order, a family. This relates directly back to Machiavelli's The Prince, and Foucault's aforementioned conceptions of truth and power. Edward Said, informed by the works of Noam Chomsky, Michel Foucault, and Antonio Gramsci. Edward Said is a founding figure of post-colonialism, established with the book Orientalism, a humanist critique of the Enlightenment, which criticizes Western knowledge of the East, specifically the English and the French constructions of what is and what is not Oriental, whereby said knowledge then led to cultural tendencies towards a binary opposition of the Orient versus the Occident, wherein one concept is defined in opposition to the other concept, and from which they emerge as of unequal value. In Culture and Imperialism, the sequel to Orientalism, Said proposes that, despite the formal end of the Age of Empire, after the Second World War, colonial imperialism left a cultural legacy to colonized peoples, which remains in their contemporary civilizations, and that said cultural imperialism is very influential in the international systems of power. Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak, a self-described practical Marxist feminist deconstructionist, Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak has published a number of works challenging the legacy of colonialism, including a critique of post-colonial reason towards a history of the vanishing present, Other Asias, and Can the Subaltern Speak? In Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak critiques common representations in the West of the Sati as being controlled by authors other than the participants. Because of this, Spivak argues that the subaltern, referring to the communities that participate in the Sati, are not able to represent themselves through their own voice. Spivak says that cultural imperialism has the power to disqualify or erase the knowledge and mode of education of certain populations that are low on the social hierarchy. Throughout Can the Subaltern Speak? Spivak cites the works of Karl Marx, Michel Foucault, Walter Benjamin, Louis Althusser, Jacques Derrida, and Edward Said, among others. In A Critique of Post-Colonial Reason, Spivak argues that Western philosophy has a history of not only exclusion of the subaltern from discourse, but also does not allow them to occupy the space of a fully human subject.